Good evening. It's Paul Cabine, and I'm the Adult Services Programmer at the Garland County Library. And today we have a very, very special and relevant program called A Closer Look at Harriet Tubman. We will have a special guest presenter in a few minutes, Dr. Carla F. Carter, but the wonderful Hot Springs Cultural Affairs Manager, Mary Zunick, will introduce her here shortly. So, as I'm sure many of our viewers, at least if you're from Hot Springs, will know, our city's downtown is now the home of a beautiful freedom mural depicting Harriet Tubman leading the way towards freedom. So, let me put a photo of that up on the screen here. And the muralist of the freedom mural is a fine artist named Perrion Hurd, who Mary actually featured as the guest interviewing him on an episode of her Gallery Walk Talk series earlier this month. So you can go back after this broadcast tonight and watch their interview on the library's Facebook page or YouTube channel in our video archive there. And we did have a few minor technical difficulties with that one, but I still think it was very much worth watching. And this wonderful photo of the mural was featured in the Hot Springs Post and was photographed by Cassidy Kendall. So thank you, Cassidy, for letting us use this. So the formal unveiling of the mural was just a few days ago on Sunday, and I heard it was just a wonderful event. So hopefully Mary can tell us a little bit about that in her opening remarks. But if at any point during the broadcast you live viewers have any questions or comments whatsoever, please don't hesitate to share, and we'll address those at the end of the show. So Mary, I'm going to turn it over to you, and thank you for leading this program today.
Great. Thank you so much, Paul. Thanks for having me on again and for all that you do to bring great information to the people of Hot Springs. Yes, the formal unveiling was on Saturday, and on Sunday. And I just want to echo what Paul just said about the previous interview with Perrion Hurd. We had some technical difficulties just briefly, but if you kind of even forward past that a little bit on the video, it was a great interview and some fantastic news. The artist Perrion Hurd was just announced a couple of days ago that he is the recipient of the Governor's Arts Award for individual artists. So we knew he was a talented artist and a fantastic person to work with. But now he has even another accolade in that he is a recipient of the Governor's Arts Award this year. Those are presented in the spring, so here in a few months. But like I said, that was just announced. The mural is located on the corner Market and Central in downtown Hot Springs. And someone came to me a little over a year ago and suggested a Harriet Tubman mural. And the more we talked about it, the Cultural Alliance decided it was a great idea to partner and work toward that as a goal. You know, most of us learned about Harriet Tubman as a small section in the American history book. But there is so much more to her story, and that we have learned during the process of creating this mural. It was tremendous local support, people making donations to make this happen. And the mural, in addition to the program this evening and Sunday's celebration that happened at the Central Theater downtown, was all possible thanks to a grant from the Arkansas Humanities Council and the National Endowment for Humanities. And because of that grant, we looked at different ways to make the mural more meaningful. It is obviously a beautiful piece of artwork in downtown Hot Springs, public artwork for all to enjoy. But to look at the history and the life of Harriet Tubman, and through the process of putting the program together, I reached out to Philander Smith and was so very fortunate when I contacted Philander Smith in Little Rock, Philander Smith College, to make the acquaintance of Dr. Carla Carter. And she is our special guest this evening. Dr. Carla Carter holds a BA in English Literature from Spelman College, an MA in creative writing from Queens College, and a PhD in Christian education, specializing in the role of the arts in higher education. That's from Jacksonville Theological Seminary. Dr. Carter teaches visual and performing arts and theater at Philander Smith College, and really especially focuses on slave narrative and the American and African American literature. Sorry. She has produced and played Harriet Tubman in various theatrical productions in Chicago and New York, and she's developed a course on Afrofuturism for Philander Smith College, discussing how Harriet Tubman is the first space-time traveler. So I am going to now invite Dr. Carla Carter to join us, and I'm going to, there she is. Hi, Dr. Carter. So I am going to turn the virtual program over to Dr. Carter, and I'm going to sit back and enjoy. Thank you so much for enjoying for being with us tonight, Dr. Carter.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm very honored to have been able to participate in the program on Sunday and with my students, and then also be able to talk about this phenomenal woman who we call Harriet Tubman. I just wanted to give some background, because I'm just going to go straight into what I'm going to talk about, and just give you some background context of what was going on. Harriet was born in Maryland, and some 200 years before, when the 1619, everybody's talking about the 1619 project, where the first documented enslaved person was actually documented. And so we look at Harriet around 1849, around the time, and that's when she begins to escape. But before that, I want to give you some context about what was going on in Maryland. So Maryland basically was mostly a tobacco-driven crop. And then they began to switch to wheat and grain. And with that, grain took less of a labor force. And so many slave traffickers began selling enslaved people into the deeper South, where cotton and all of those other plants and crops were growing. And so this sets the stage for the over 100,000 to 400,000 attempted and successful escapes and enslaved extractions. And I call them extractions because, and you won't necessarily hear me call anyone a slave owner. They were traffickers, because you don't own people. And at this time, now more than ever, we see that because of the selling of enslaved people to traffickers in the Deep South, families were being torn apart more than ever before. And so that became the precipice for why Harriet felt such the need to make sure that she escaped. In addition, we know that by a mere proximity, Maryland was 90 miles away from Pennsylvania, which was the closest northern state of free people. And so it gave even the reluctant of enslaved people hope that they too could weather the terrain and go through the process of being extracted or escaping from their situation in Maryland. So with that, I just want to begin this talk of Harriet Tubman and Afrofuturism. Afrofuturism is a term coined by Mark Derry a while ago when he was talking about Black sci-fi writers. And so what he looked at was Samuel Delany and Octavia Butler and all of those Black scholarly writers who were writing about what it meant to be Black in the future. And so recently, the last two years, I actually decided to create a course in Afrofuturism in helping students to understand what does it mean to dream Black in the future. And we start with looking at dystopias and those are universes or places where it is the worst things that could happen. And in doing so, I often bring up Harriet, that Harriet lived in a dystopian future, a dystopian universe in the past of what we call slavery or slave institution, and a slave institution process. And so for her, having been able to escape and go into a present condition of Philadelphia where Black folk were free and able to walk around and be able to exist, and navigating that 90 miles mostly on foot, and also having to have the navigate environmental terrain that she was familiar with, but never having to actually navigate it in a way and a time and a space and time and space that she did in order to be quote unquote free. And then we look at her again as the Fugitive Act of 1850 hits, where Pennsylvania is now not a safe place for previously enslaved people who did not have papers of freedom. And so with that act, it became dangerous to actually be there without having free papers. And so to be able to then go into a futuristic space of Canada, having never been there, having not necessarily having heard about it, but not necessarily having met people who had actually gone to Canada. So you think about that she went from the past to the present and then and helped others escape. And we know of 11 documented people that she helped to navigate to Canada. And then not only to be able to do that, but to also do that 13 times that we know that are documented, helping over 70 enslaved members, and often members of her family. So what I want to talk to you about is her as a time and space traveler, and in Afrofuturism, we talk about the divine feminine and what does that mean in terms of how gender and women exist. Also, Harriet as an other. In Afrofuturism, we look at how our people that are defined as having otherness with them. And in this case, Harriet had a disability. So that was her other quality that most people would have thought was a disability, and ended up being her greatest gift. And then finally, we look at the mysticism or the ontology or the metaphysics of her faith. And so I will talk about Harriet and her God. And with that, we'll just go straight on in. So Harriet, as time and space traveler, she was able to navigate within 3 spaces or states that were in their own development stages. So we're not necessarily talking about time frame, because Maryland and Philadelphia or Pennsylvania had the same times. So if it's 9 o'clock in Maryland, it's 9 o'clock in Pennsylvania, those kind of things. But what we're talking about is where they were in the development of how humanity was treated. And so in that case, they were eras apart from each other. You had the South, Maryland, which was the past, and how they treated people as 3/5 of humans. And they put that into law to justify not being able to look at the humanity of Black people. Then you had the present, where Philadelphia and Pennsylvania, they were actually working to make sure that not just Black previously enslaved folk, but then also there was a huge migration or immigration population of Irish people that were going into Pennsylvania. And then you had the future. And so for the past, we look at the fact that this is 1849, September 1849, when Harriet decides that this is my time. I've got to go. This is nothing new. We are 200, if you think about it, if you look at the 1619 Project, that is 230 years into the institution of slave labor. And so what we know is that people were desperately looking to go to escape. There was a very organized underground type of system in which all people, all colors, all races were involved in helping Black enslaved people escape. We also know that free Blacks could also somewhat seamlessly, they did get harassed, but they were able to travel between the South and the North on trains and also by buggies, as long as they had their papers. And so we look at Harriet in the past, but really it was toward the end of what we know to be the slave institution. And that this also, because there were so many people that were willing to risk their own lives to help and support, this also was by proximity of where Maryland and Pennsylvania were located. So then you had the present. And we know that Harriet escaped in 1849, but then in 1850 was the Fugitive Slave Act. So it was only 1 year later. And these threatened the new laws and the new addition of any persons that had been previously deemed slaves. And so also became a big rift between the Irish immigrants and free Blacks looking for work. There wasn't necessarily enough work for people who were moving in droves to Pennsylvania. And so in September 18th, 1850, by Congress, the Fugitive Slave Act was part of the compromise. The act required that slaves be returned to their owners, even if they were in a free state. And that is if you could not show that you had either bought your freedom or that you had been emancipated from a slave trafficker. The act also made the federal government responsible for finding and returning and trying or putting on trial escaped enslaved people. The future was Canada and Auburn, New York. 1849, Canada was beyond futuristic in that there was an understanding that there was a wealth of jobs for anyone who could get there, that there was opportunity for land ownership. And that is huge because we know that many of, even within the freedom clauses or whatever, previously enslaved people were allowed to work on their land, but they were not allowed to own the land. And so Canada offered this futuristic type of thing of land ownership. And there was opportunities for agricultural space for one's own to grow their own crops, to become business owners. And so Harriet actually ended up taking advantage of all of that when she was there with her family. So you can imagine the planning and the preparation to now I am Harriet. I am in Canada or I am in Pennsylvania. I have to now unknow what I know in order to go back into the past to get the rest of my family and the rest of the members who are going. So 13 times she had to unlearn what freedom looked like, what freedom felt like in her body. So that becomes, how do you change your walk? How do you change your facial expressions? How do you look at people or not look at people as a woman, as a Black woman, as a Black to be enslaved woman, coming from a freedom that you have known, to go back into the past and have to remember what that body memory feels like in your body, so that you can then navigate how you need to extract enslaved people. So the understanding, so what we know about Harriet and what that Afrofuturistic kind of feeling is, and the reason of time travel, she talks about the fact that even during her seizures, she would leave her body and she would literally go to the place or the space where she would meet up with the next people that she would be able to help to escape. So there was an understanding and an unfeeling that she had to reduce herself to in order. So I always ask people, can you tell me where hurt is in your body? Because hurt and anxiety and uncertainty manifests itself in illness in the body. And so does joy. But oftentimes, so what we know mentally she had to do was figure out how to unfeel uncertainty, how to unfeel anxiety, how to unfeel flight and fight response that permeates in the body that can leave people sometimes paralyzed. And this is what she was so amazing, and what people don't talk about in terms of trauma and how it lives in the body, but then what she had to unlearn to do, what she was able to do in freedom, but then had to turn back and revisit what that felt like and unlearn it in her body so that she could be there for others to escape. I hope that made sense. The second part is the divine feminine. And this again becomes an unconditioning of a woman's role in society that she had to learn. I often tell people the story of when I first went into Taekwondo. My father put me, I was in dance and modern dance and cheerleading and all of the girly girl kind of things, modeling, you name it, I was all into it. But there was a surge that was going on in New York of kidnapped young Black girls. And my father decided that he was going to put me into karate so that I would be able to defend myself. And I remember one time the headmaster, Master Branch, calling my father and saying, Dr. Carter, Reverend Carter, we do not need your money that much. You can come and take her because she won't fight. She won't do anything that we need, and you're wasting your money. And I remember my father coming to one of the practices and watching for a minute and watching me just flunder and flubber around and not be present and not want to be a part of this thing of karate. And he taking off his shoes, coming on to the mat, and he hit me. And he said, block. And at the time, I thought that was the most horrific thing that a father could do to a girl. And he said, I will not lose you because you decided to give up and just let somebody take you. You will go, you will fight. I will be here every day, and I will make sure that you participate. Needless to say, I did receive my Black belt. And it was 12, might have been 12 to 15 young women in a dojo of about 45 young men and men. And the way that they trained us young women was that we had to be ready to do what we thought was unacceptable behavior as a woman and a female in order to survive. That is what Harriet did. Thus, I ended up winning many trophies and also not being able to fight in women's divisions during competitions because we were so good because of the way that they trained us and the way that they unconditioned us to what we thought women were supposed to be like. Thus, this is exactly what Harriet did. A woman of childbearing years, 27 years old, of a certain age, pre-menopausal. So therefore, she was already of childbearing age. We don't often talk about what that was like to be a woman with a cycle in the woods during a time, and you are responsible for others. We're not sure. We don't talk about it. She doesn't talk about it. It is not referenced. And yet we know that this was a possibility during her long treks. 90 miles on foot was 5 to 10 days, depending in the woods, depending on when she decided to go and when she was able to extract enslaved people. From a very young age, we know that she preferred the outside, working in the fields and trapping muskrats in the forest, rather than being in the perceived coveted house positions. She couldn't stand being in the house. She was not good at it. She talked about it all the time, and she was often threatened with being sold because of the fact that she was not necessarily someone who was good to work in the house. She also did this in a dress. Now, some people would think that this is a hindrance, and yet we know that she carried guns and she carried sawed-off shotguns. And what better way to hide anything like that within the bloomers as well as the big dresses that she had been known for prior to her work being a spy for the military. When you ask her, she would actually, if she would actually kill someone, she said yes. If he was weak enough to give out, he'd be weak enough to betray us all and all who had helped us. And do you think I'd let so many die just for one cowardly man? She tells the story of her brother. He says, Harriet, I can't go any farther. My brother moaned as we ran through the darkened woods. Just let me go. I'll take the whipping and promise never to return again. She said, I understood his fear. I'd seen it before and had even felt it when I first ran away from the plantation. The good Lord will see us through, she said, but poor Jim was so sure we'd get caught that he tried to turn back. She then reached into her pocket and pulled out the shiny silver pistol. I used when encouraging words weren't good enough, she said. You're going to live free in the North or you're going to die now in the South. I warned him. I didn't like doing this, but there were too many people risking their lives for his freedom. Without another word, Jim turned and began walking north. I knew he'd thank me once he tasted freedom, she said. This is what she had to do. This is what we know her for. The unlearning, the unthinkable of what women were supposed to be conditionally conditioned to do in society. And yet she also mastered the nuances of Northern women, of what it meant to be free women. And so the nuances of that helped her be able to navigate back to the past when she had to dress up as a Northern woman coming to the South or as a Southern Black free woman. Those nuances became very important. So she was a trickster and she was a master of disguises. But more than anything, she was willing to stretch the limits and the role of what it meant to be a woman during this particular time. The unconditioning of herself or never, or sometimes I would even say she never even bought into what that was, because she never from the beginning, like she said, she was a free child. She was raised like she was a weed in the forest. Harriet was the only woman to lead men into combat during the Civil War. After the war, she moved to New York and was active in campaigning for equal rights for women. So there we see a woman willing to do what was necessary to bend the roles, the gender roles, at less than 5 feet, in order to make sure that everybody that she decided to help would get through. The third thing that I want to discuss is her disability. Harriet challenges the notion of what it means to be literate, with people choosing to use the second definition as not well educated. Literate describes someone who has the capability to read and write. That is what the definition of it is. The word literate may be used to mean being well educated in a certain area, and sometimes it's used as an end all be all on describing someone's ability to be proficient in something. But sometimes people assign the word literate as if it is the total value of someone and not necessarily its definition of not being able to read. So what does it mean to be well educated, and who do we label as being well educated? Education is whatever we learn on a daily basis, while being educated means being able to internalize the information learned. In an essay written by Chandra Daly, the word education is from the Latin word educatum, which is comprised of 2 words, e and duco. E means a transitional progress from inward to outwards. Education is also connected to the root inducere, which means a force from the internal to the external. And duco implies developing or progressing, or in other words, always in development, thus making it rational that to be educated is the ever-developing process of transferring what we learn or know internally to that can be replicated or applied outwardly. So according to a famous researcher, Mahanan, the definition of an educated person should be viewed in terms of thinking, learning, and language abilities. So when we look at education or educated person in terms of thinking abilities, Moynihan believes that an educated person should possess the general knowledge needed to be able to make informed, rational decisions. He or she should also be able to withdraw conclusions from both familiar and novel situations. So we look at Harriet. Harriet had the thinking abilities because she had to plan a route to get back to the South and have routes to get back to the North with several plan Bs and Cs along the way. She had to think rationally about who was at risk to take and who she could not take, and at what point to ensure the safety of all of those she was helping versus one who might jeopardize the entire escape plan. She also used her skills of water navigation and the forestry in her travels in 1863. She became the first woman to lead an assault during the Civil War in the Combahee River raid, where 700 enslaved people were set free. Her record spoke for itself, where she said, "I never lost a passenger or steered off course in the process." And yet, this woman, who was a mastermind in planning, it took 30 years after the Civil War for Harriet to receive her government pension for fighting in the war and leading that historic feat in Combahee River. In the case of learning abilities, Moynihan states that an educated person should have mastery of the general thinking abilities that enables one to have informed, intelligent decisions, assessments, estimates, and inferences. Harriet had this ability as well when she decided to only travel in the winter months, when less people were outside and during the nighttime, when families were more likely to gather indoors at a particular time, as well as on the weekends. Because runaway notices could not be printed during the weekends, they could only be printed on Mondays. Some researchers have gone on to conjecture that the running at night was also twofold in that Harriet had hypersomnia, a form of seizures that we now know as narcolepsy. Narcolepsy in a person is most prevalent during the daytime. We know that Harriet was prone to sleeping during the day and had many hallucinations or what she called premonitions during the day, but she was also said to be nocturnal in nature. This may be why she chose the winters when the days were shorter and the nights were longer as well. It worked to her advantage of her disability. And in terms of language skills, Mohannan defines an educated person as a person capable of using a language clearly, precisely, and effectively in relation to knowledge. I go one more to say, Harriet used the language of the wild to communicate. It is documented over and over again. She used what some call the barred owl, also known as a hoot owl, to warn slaves seeking freedom. Robert Hayden's poem Runagate, Runagate mentions Tubman and the owl she mimicked perfectly. Hoot owl calling in the ghosted air, 5 times calling to the haunts in the air, shadow of a face in the scary leaves, shadow of a voice in the talking leaves. There we know that language is relative. And when you're in the woods and the wild, knowing the language of the wild, knowing the language of the animals that live there so that you can give calls out seamlessly without people noticing that there was a difference in the way in which communication was given at that time. Other skill sets that benefited Harriet was that of being an herbalist. According to Leah Penniman, executive director of Soulfire Farms, a Black, Indigenous, people of color farmer area, farmland, enslaved herbalists fought to keep their traditions at great cost, and slave owners so feared being poisoned by the people they enslaved that herbal practices were banned altogether. Yet Tubman used remedies passed down from her grandmother to treat fugitives and enslaved people, keep babies quiet on the Underground Railroad, and to heal the soldiers during the Civil War of dysentery during that particular time. So she was a master herbalist as well. It is for this reason that if Harriet existed today and was prescribed to go to school during today's time, she may have been assigned to a special education class, or at least been prescribed a 504 plan due to her extreme behavior defiant disorder, or for her inability to focus and stay awake during the day because of her hypersomnia, or she would have been pulled out in a pull-out program where she would receive one-to-one support, which we know she would have hated because she couldn't read. We would not know the remarkable, highly intelligent Harriet that we now know of and are still discovering. For that matter, how many Harriets do we not know of now because of the criteria we use to discern who is smart and who is considered educated? Given the notion of the definition of what we deem smart or educated, it can be said then that it is not how smart, or educated a person is. It is how a person is smart and educated. If we use the previous essay and definitions of what literate and educated is, then Harriet was not smart, nor was she not educated. And my final point is, in a time where the Bible and religion was used to control the psyche of people, Harriet chose to believe in a God that had her best interests at heart. According to the Ohio Central, the Second Great Awakening was happening during this particular time in the U.S. religious revival that began in the late 18th century and lasted until the middle of the 19th century. While it occurred in all parts of the United States, it was especially strong in the Northeast and the Midwest. A desire to reform the U.S. also arose from the Second Great Awakening. So here you had, more than anything, Blacks and whites and all colors and ethnicities coming together to say that we are going to be good Christians, and we are going to fight against what is happening in other spaces. Additionally, women's involvement in the revival provided support for the women's rights movement. Christians at this time believed that they needed to reform America in order to usher in Christ's second coming. Harriet was believed to be a staunch supporter of the revival movement or the Great Awakening, yet she refuted the teaching of the New Testament that was so often taught, and clinging to the stories of the Hebrews and Moses. An episode of Arkansas PBS stated, "This was not a distant, faraway God in some kind of institutional church, but it was a God," said of the evangelist, "involved in the daily lives of people, involved in every thought and every deed of your life. There had never been anything like it. There were meetings of 3,000 people out in fields, Blacks and whites together, listening to a preacher who said, 'Here in my message is a new life for you. Here's a new chance for you. Here's a God who has your interests at heart. Here's a God who can deliver you.' Over time, large numbers of enslaved people found the biblical message of spiritual equality before God appealing, and found comfort in the biblical theme of deliverance, but not in the deliverance that we know. In an article, Faith Made Harriet Fearless by The Conversation, Tubman's belief was that there was no separation between the physical and spiritual worlds, and was a direct result of African religious practices. Tubman literally believed that she moved between a physical existence and a spiritual experience, where she sometimes flew over the land. This we see, as with many narratives by those formerly enslaved, the African spiritual practice infused with the more contemporary practices of Christianity, using herbalism and mysticism to explain the Bible teachings and healing methods within those texts. An enslaved person who trusted Tubman to help him escape simply noted that Tubman had the charm, or in other words, God's protection and favor. Tubman believed even that her seizures that she suffered, she believed that God was speaking to her and guiding her, telling her what to do and protecting her. Harriet also recalled in her biography about being a young girl and not being able to do such a good job, but remembering that her mother said, "You can always call on the Lord for help at any hour of the day or night." And this is what she said. She said, "I would remember that during the many difficult times to come." Fellow abolitionist Thomas Garrett said, "I have never met any person of any color who had more confidence in the voice of God than Harriet." Other abolitionists said she would talk to God and he talked with her every day of her life. God told her to stop one day, and she led a scared group of men through an icy stream and to freedom because she listened. Harriet once said that slavery was the next thing to hell. She helped many transcend that hell by her faith in her God. This completes my talk.
Wonderful. That was absolutely wonderful. Thank you so much. And, I haven't sat in a classroom in a long time, but I wish I could come sit in your classroom. So thank you for allowing us all to do that this evening. And so
Thank
many things that I would have never thought of. And I mean, you mentioned that on Sunday too, that she was, childbearing years, all of the daily things that women have to contend with, and that doesn't stop just because you have, just like the seizures didn't stop, just like, all of the obstacles that she had to overcome. Um, and is Paul there? Are there any questions from the viewers?
Our viewers are being shy tonight. I guess they're half focused on making their Thanksgiving meals. But I just thought it was a very powerful message when you said how many other Harriets might be out there, however you phrased it, just because of,
Thank you.
yeah, and judgment based on how we perceive uh, people and young women's and young Black women's intelligence. It's very, I thought that was a very powerful message, very, very relevant.
Do you know? I mean, is there, other than divine inspiration? I mean, does she at any point in her interviews or autobiographies, or who her role model was, or why she was like this, why she was so special?
It's sometimes one of those things where you never know where your rebellion comes from or why it's needed, even as a young person. And so we see her as this very rebellious, the reason that, she was hit in the head, it was because she jumped in front of one of her friends who was trying to escape, and she jumped in front to save him. So some part is nature and not nurture. Some part of who she was just who she was. And my suspicions is that it got harder and harder for her to tame that, you know. And so her parents, she was quite often, quote unquote, rented out to other traffickers who found her infuriating, and she was whipped and everything like that because she just was defiant and would not be what they wanted her to be, or their definition of what they wanted her to be.
Had a question come in. Liz says, "Thank you, Dr. Carter. That was incredibly informative and so very interesting." And her question is, any idea if we know who her descendants are from her siblings?
Yes, actually, there is a Facebook page. There's a Facebook picture going around of the great niece, her great niece, and the great niece of Frederick Douglass.
Oh, wow.
And it's circulating now. And there's also a Harriet Tubman museum that just opened. I believe it's in Maryland. And I know there are different kind of pop-up Harriet Tubmans where they have the descendants listed. And oftentimes they come in.
That's wonderful. Yeah, there are some incredible resources out there for curriculum. I shared curriculum with some of the local school districts in the months leading up to the mural celebration, just so that they could kind of share it with their children, the students in their classrooms, hopefully, to give us a more thorough appreciation of Harriet Tubman, more than just that brief moment that most students learn about her. And now, do you know any current status of her being on the $20 bill?
So there's much conversation about that. And a lot of it has to do with her own values of currency and capitalism. And so those who are giving it pushback are, because in her defense, feel that she would not have wanted this. She would not have wanted to be on currency. Does that make sense based on,
Yeah.
The era that she came from, and when, the time frame that she came, that the capitalism, and so to have so the pushback is coming from both, for and against, but mostly the against of that. This is probably something that she wouldn't have wanted at all.
What do you think?
The more that I'm thinking about it, the more that I'm saying no to.
Oh, really? Yeah. That's interesting that you would say that, because I would think, oh, what an honor to be the first woman to be on our, our currency, our paper money anyway. I know we've had Susan B. Anthony on the coins, but that would, many would say that would make her the most important female figure in American history. And that,
yeah, and I think it's just the way. So let me just say, I'm not against it. I'm just not necessarily for pushing for it if it's, if it's a big deal. And I think it's because of the way I'm reading.
mm-hmm.
You read things all the time, and you're teaching things all the time. And so in rereading things and discovering kind of in her own words, would she made, I'm not sure.
In fact, one of the first sketches that Perrion presented to the committee was it kind of resembled a $20 bill, not really, but like the icon figure around, or the not halo, but like the area around her head kind of was a little reminiscent of the center of a currency. Anyway, it was something that one of the considerations, but I think the one we ended up with was absolutely perfect. But
I love the one that my students loved it. My visual arts students, we were able to come back and show them, and they are just amazed with the whole process, and just having honored to have been part of the the whole program. And so, and
can you tell us?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, would you tell us a little bit about the program from Sunday and what your students' performance was?
So we did the President's Scholarship Gala, and our theme for that day was leaving legacies, moving Philander forward. And so one of the things that we wanted to do was capture, Philander was founded in 1877. And so 30 years after Harriet. And so I like to think, I've always liked to think that of the 700 at the Combahee River, if I do 23andMe, I might find an ancestor that was freed at that time. And that Philander, with its social justice ideals that we embed within our curricula and within our campus, period, would have been an offshoot from that 700. And so what we wanted to do was kind of give Harriet some credit for why Philander existed. And so we started with pictures of our landscape in 1877 and leading up to what we look like today. But our students really loved the soundtrack, the theme song from Harriet, which is stand up and take my people with me. And so it was a way for us to also collaborate with other departments and other programs within our school. So we had the creatives, which are the theater students, we had the poets, we had the dancers, and we had the choir, our legendary choir. And we put together this amazing opening, and it was my dream or vision that it would open similar to something like the Grammys, where there's just an opening number, there's no introduction, and let the audience, and it's a multimedia presentation with the pictures flashing of Philander from 1877 to its current state. And so that was what the program was that we were able to actually bring to Sunday's program, which was apropos.
It was absolutely perfect. I mean, everyone left talking about it. And I wonder if the performance from the President's Gala is available online somewhere. I'll try. I know that there were some videos of ours here, but I don't, if there was something there.
Yes, we do. We do have the video. We're actually looking, we just want to give credit to the different songs that we use. So right now we're just adding that into it, and then I'll be happy to share that link.
Oh, that would be wonderful. I will share it on the Hot Springs Area Cultural Alliance Facebook page as well. When you do, just have to let me know. And people out there interested. Yeah, because I would encourage everyone to check that out. And also the film Harriet. We showed the film Harriet after this, or as kind of as a second act of the celebration on Sunday, and it's phenomenal as well.
Absolutely. And we are open for registration for the spring or the fall. We have a new visual and performing arts. I would be completely remiss if I didn't mention that. We have a new visual and performing arts major, and very excited about that. And so we're looking at studio fine arts as well as the digital arts in film and photography and animation, as well as the theater arts and the performing arts, which is acting, directing, dance, and vocal and instrumental.
Wow, that's fantastic. And of course, Philander Smith is located in Little Rock.
He is.
Yes. Fantastic. It's been great working with you. We certainly appreciate your input and your presentation this evening, of course, and then on Sunday as well, you and all of your students and the other faculty that came down from Philander Smith.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. This was wonderful. I got to go back and look in all my notes.
We did have another question and comment come in, both from Rosetta, and her question is, in your words, why did it take so long for Harriet Tubman to get compensated on her veterans pension?
Oh, the same reason still now. There was gender bias, and then there was racial bias and discrimination. And so, yes, we can certainly use you for your gifts and everything. I mean, just think about it. She was the one that was responsible for enlisting during the Civil War previously enslaved members. And so that was a way for them to actually be legitimately considered free, even if they didn't earn their quote freedom or buy their freedom, or their trafficker didn't release them legally. By signing them up for the Civil War, that was their way of getting their passport to freedom, so that you say. And she was most instrumental in making sure that happened. However, we do know that the women's suffrage movement was happening at the same time. Women were still fighting to be called to have equal rights, or the right to vote, and all of those different things. And so 30 years, they could not give to her what they could not give to others. or what they weren't willing to give to others. And it took 30 years.
Thank you for sharing.
You're welcome.
Well, Mary, are there any other announcements you would like to make?
Nothing at this time. Of course, the Cultural Alliance, we're always open to new ideas and new programming and how we can celebrate, advocate, and promote the arts and culture here in Hot Springs. For example, this mural, I mean, someone came to us with this idea, and so, and look what it's blossomed into. So I would just encourage anybody to, if you want to be involved in the Cultural Alliance, to please contact me. They can email, hotspringsarts.org is the website, or the Hot Springs Area Cultural Alliance Facebook page, and there's contact information on both of those places. So if you would like to be a part of programming like this or any arts programming for Hot Springs, to please reach out to me. And I'll be back next week with the Sister City program on the 30th, and then on December 1st, I'll be chatting with Zach Dryden from Dryden Pottery here in Hot Springs, and talking all about what's happening for Gallery Walk on the first Friday of December, December 3rd.
Thank you. And anyone who is watching this live, we appreciate you. Or if you're watching in the future, we appreciate you. And this program is recorded, so you can share it after the fact. And please do on Facebook and YouTube, and all the past videos. Like we said at the beginning of the program, you can go back and watch those. We've done several with Mary and other presenters in the past, and we have many more to come. And if you have any questions or you want to learn more from Dr. Carter here, let them know one more time where they can find you.
Oh, you can find me at Philander Smith College, and my email address is ccarter@philander.edu.
And if they have interest in learning more about Harriet Tubman or just the freedom in general, do you have any recommendations for good resources, websites, books, any of the above?
Oh my goodness, there's so many, but there's none better than In Her Own Words. So any kind of biography or autobiography you can find. There are so many. She's had so many, at least 4 biographers who tried to capture. Arkansas PBS has a great piece on as well that's kind of in her own words as well. And yeah, I think. And then if you can, what I would say is also the Harriet Tubman museums that are popping up. Those are great resources. Oftentimes more with the more contemporary ways in which to look at Harriet. They have those.
Thank you. All right. Well, once again, thank you both for being here, and I hope everyone has a good holiday weekend, the two of you and all the viewers. And any other remarks before we hit in broadcast? Don't want to cut you off early because I know you have a wealth of information to share. So if you have any other words, I want to give you a chance to say.
No, thank you for having me. This has been wonderful. I'm looking forward to looking at more of the series, and I think Hot Springs, yes. Way to go.
Yeah, thank you, Paul. Thank you so much, and thank you again, Dr. Carter. So much to be thankful for this holiday, the beautiful artwork downtown, the program from Sunday, and then this evening as well. So I know we'll hopefully Dr. Carter will stay connected with us, and maybe we can plan some future programming as well to include Philander Smith and Dr. Carter for our arts and cultural programming here in Hot Springs.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I look forward